Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm. Hey, in this project, we're going to start working on kind of this is going to be a big deal. This is going to be a lot of stuff. We're going to actually make a first person shooter / adventure game. And we're going to work on it for the entire term. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be fun. We're going to put a lot of work into this project. And today we're going to actually start that project. We're going to build our character controller today. We're going to build the scenes that we need and all of that stuff. So I'm going to stop rambling and I'm going to get started. Let's go ahead and create a new project. I want to specify specifically where I want my project to go. You're going to probably do the same thing. You might have a flash drive that you want to put your project onto. For me, on one of my hard drives here, notice I have like 5 different drives. On one of my drives, I have a game design folder, which has, let me go into it, which has tons of game design projects that I've built. And so I want to put it in my game design folder. I'm going to call mine first person. And I'm going to click create folder so that now I have a game design first person project. Now, again, you're going to want to put your projects in a place where you can get access to them so that you can back up your files. You can put them on a flash drive and take them home and work on them if you want. But you want to have access. You want to have control over these files. So make sure you're preparing your folders in the right way. All right, I'm going to click create and edit, and we will go ahead and start working on this project. Okay. So the first part of this project is there's not going to be a lot of objects and stuff that we're playing with, but it is a great idea for us to organize our project in a way to make it easier for later. So down here in the file system menu, I'm going to create 2 new folders. I'm going to create a scenes folder, and I'm going to create an objects folder. And you know what? Inside the objects folder, I'm going to create a folder called player, because we're going to have more than one kind of object. All right. So inside of our scenes folder, let's create a new 3D scene, and we can just click 3D scene there. And I'm going to rename this to world. This is going to be the world that we generate. We're going to work on this a lot. We're going to build some like outdoor environments, some indoor environments, all kinds of cool stuff. But for now, all we really need is just a cube. So let's go ahead and build that real quick. In my world, I want to hit the plus button, and I'm going to be looking for a mesh instance. A mesh instance. A mesh instance is basically just think of a mesh as something that just wraps around a 3D object. This is just going to be a new 3D object that we want to create. So I'm going to click create there. I'm going to rename this to ground. And I'm going to give this mesh instance a new mesh. And I'm going to give it let's create a new cube mesh. And so now we have a new cube in the middle of our scene. Perfect. So I actually want this to be really big, really wide, because it's going to be kind of like the floor that we're running around on in our prototype here. So I'm going to go to the transform, and in the scale on the X, I'm going to set that to 20. And on the Z, I'm going to set that to 20 as well. And we can zoom out a bit and see that we now have like a platform. Okay. Now, this doesn't actually have a collider on it yet. So what we need to do is we need to add a collider, but there's an easy way to do it with a mesh instance. Instead of going and adding a collider, a collision shape to this thing and then matching it and everything, what we can do is we can click mesh and create tri-mesh static body. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a new static body node and a collision shape that perfectly match the mesh that we've created. Okay. Perfect. That is our world. This is a very, very fun world that we've just built for ourselves. Let's go ahead and save this. So scene, save scene. We're going to put this in our scenes folder, and we're going to call it world. Click save. Perfect. Okay, so now that our world is built, we need to actually build a player to go inside that world. So we're going to create the player as a separate object, just like we always do. So I'm going to go ahead and click the plus button here. And the root node for this player object is going to be a kinematic body, because we want it to move around in physical space. So we're going to have a kinematic body that can move around in physical space and be interacted with by other physical objects. All right, so this kinematic body, let's rename it to player. And you know what, before we go too much further, let's go ahead and save this. And you know what, let's get rid of the errors first. Okay, so the first thing that our new player needs is we need a collision shape. So let's create a new collision shape. You know what, let's create the mesh first. So we're going to grab that mesh instance again. And let's create a capsule mesh. Oh gosh, that's big. So a capsule is basically it's kind of like a pill almost, right? And so with our capsule, what we can do is we can actually change, because we don't want it sitting on its side. We want it kind of standing up vertically. So we can rotate it and make it a little bit bigger or smaller, however we want. This is going to kind of mimic the player. This is going to mimic the body of the player. So let's go to transform. Let's rotate it 90. Nope, not 90 on the Y. 90 on the X. That's what it's going to be. Rotate it 90 on the X. So now it's standing straight up. And let's change it so that it is... let's play around with these options here. So instead of changing the scale on the X and Y, we're going to change the radius and the height here within the mesh options. And the radius we'll set to 0.75, so it's a bit skinnier, but we want it to be a bit taller, so 1.25 for the height. Okay, so now we have a nice pill shape. Now, your player will never see this pill shape. This is really just for us, so that when we go to build our game, we know where the player is. So that's all this is for. Okay, perfect. Now we need to add a collider. So let's add a collision shape. Collision shape. Perfect. And let's add a capsule shape. Uh-oh, now our collision shape is not matching with our capsule. So we're going to have to do all those same things that we just did. Let's click on capsule shape. We'll change the radius to 0.75. We'll change the height to 1.25. Let's change the rotation on the X to 90 degrees. All right, now our capsule shape perfectly goes around our capsule mesh, and we now have a collider on our player. Perfect. Okay. So there's one more thing that we need to do. We have a player, but we need a head. The player needs a head, and we're going to actually put a camera inside the head. And this head object is going to be separate from the player. I mean, it's going to be a child of it, but this will allow us to rotate the head and move the head as we move our mouse around, but keep the player moving in different directions as well. It's basically a two-part way of building a first-person character controller. So I'm going to create a new head. What we're going to do is up here in the player node, we're going to right click, add a child node. And the node that we're going to add is something called a spatial, S-P-A-T-I-A-L, a spatial node. This is basically just an empty 3D game object. All right, so we'll create a spatial node. I'm going to rename this to head. And inside the head, let's add a camera. So as a child of the head, let's grab camera and pop that in there. And now notice that my camera is right here. It's this purple box here showing me the viewport of the camera. The camera is kind of just in the middle of the capsule. So let's grab the head and let's move it up. And actually, let's be a little bit more precise. Let's go to transform and let's move it up to 0.9. There we go. On the Y. So now we have a camera sticking out from the head, and we have a body for our player. Okay, now let's go ahead and save our scene. let's put it into the objects folder. So let's hit the up arrow to go up to our objects, and let's put it inside of player and hit save. All right, so now we have a player scene and we have a world scene. Perfect. Now let's go to our world and let's drop our player into the world real quick. So make sure your world node is selected. Let's instantiate our player. And let's get our player somewhere in the scene. So we'll just have him floating just a little bit above the plane here. Okay, now let's play our game and see what we see. Oh, we need to select a scene to be our main scene. Let's go ahead and select, and it will be world, open. All right, so now notice that I have, I can see the edges of the plane that I'm on, of that shape that I created. I can see the horizon line in the background, and I can see the sun up there. This is a 3D scene. I can't do anything yet. I can't move. I can't do really much of anything at all, but I can tell that my camera is working exactly the way I expect it to. Beautiful. All right, so let's talk about scripting. Let's go back into our player and let's start creating a script. I'm going to click plus, and I'll keep the default template. That's fine. We'll call it player. Yep, that's fine. It'll go in the player folder, and I'll click create. So now we have a player script and a player object. Okay, I'm going to get rid of all the comments, but I will keep the ready function. And I'm going to get this process delta function out of comment jail, I guess. And yeah, we'll get rid of that. Okay, so now we have extends kinematic body, we have a ready function, and we have a process delta function. Okay. The first thing we're going to need is we want to set our mouse mode to be captured inside the window when I play the game. So if I play the game, notice that I can move my mouse all over the place. That's going to cause problems when we start moving our camera around in the scene to follow our mouse, because if I go off of the window, it's going to cause problems. So inside this ready function, we can actually change this. Let's do input dot set mouse mode, and we're going to set it to, notice we have some options: input mouse mode captured, confined, hidden, or visible. We're going to say captured. So what that's going to do is whenever we start the game, it's going to keep my mouse locked into that scene. All right, now inside our process delta function, we need a way to be able to get out of that, because if I play my game right now and my mouse is locked in to the scene, notice that now my mouse is locked in, but I've lost my cursor. So this is going to be a problem because I can't get my cursor. So I'm going to need to actually do a trick to get out of here. I'm going to Alt Tab, and then inside here, I'm going to kill that. Okay. So we need to fix that problem because we want to be able to get out of our game whenever we want to. So inside our process delta function, we'll say if input dot is action just pressed, and we're going to use this UI cancel action, which by default is escape. So if we push the escape key, then we want to change that input dot set mouse mode, and we want to set it to visible. All right, so let's test that. So now notice my mouse is gone. I can't do anything with it. If I hit escape, my mouse comes back and I can close out of the window. So that's really just kind of helping us to be able to test our game well and not have any issues with our mouse leaving our screen. All right, so now that that's out of the way, let's talk about how we're going to make our character move around in our scene. So we're going to need some variables here. First, we're going to want speed, acceleration, gravity, jump power, and we're also going to want mouse sensitivity because we want to change how much our mouse moves because some users are going to want to change that. So, and we're going to export all of these variables. So let's just start creating variables. Export var speed. I'm going to set that to 10. Export var acceleration. I'll set that to 5. Export var gravity, and I'll set that to 0.98. Export var jump power, and I'll set that to 30. And export var mouse sensitivity. Okay, cool. And I'll set it equal to 0.3. All right, so those are all the variables we're going to need to make all this movement happen. But there are a couple things that we actually need that we're not going to want to export. Just as a reminder, exporting variables allows us to change them in the inspector. So let me save my scenes here. And let me take a look at my player. Now notice that I have speed, acceleration, gravity, jump power, and mouse sensitivity all as changeable variables here. I can increase them, decrease them whenever I want. I can make all kinds of changes to them here. The reason that's the power of exporting variables. All right, but there are a couple of variables that we don't want to actually export. For one, we want our velocity, which is going to be the measurement of our movement. We're going to set that to a vector 3. Oh, we don't want to export that at all. And we want our camera underscore x underscore rotation. We'll set that equal to 0. This is going to be helpful whenever we start changing our camera movement based on our mouse movement. Okay, now there's 2 more variables we're going to need. They're not really variables. They're more like references to some objects. So we're going to create an onReady var called head. Now what onReady does is it says basically whenever this game object exists, then we're going to create a reference to this thing. So it just does it right away, which is great. And I'm going to say $, and I'm going to find the object I'm looking for. And the object I'm looking for is head, right? We're trying to access this head object. But we also want the camera as well. So we'll say onReady var, we'll call this camera, and $, and we'll go to head / camera. So now we have a reference to the head and a reference to the camera that we can change all kinds of stuff about them when we move on to working on the script. All right, let's talk about mouse movement. Let's get the mouse moving the camera around. This is actually pretty easy to do. We're going to need an input function. What the input function does is it basically takes any kind of input that happens, and it creates an event based on that thing. And then what we can do is we can check to see if that event is what we're looking for, and if it is, we'll do some stuff. So func underscore input, and we're going to choose event right there. So we're going to pass in this event thing. Okay. Func input event. Now what we want to do is we want to check to see if event is input event mouse motion. Mouse motion. Basically, did you just move the mouse? If we did, then we're going to do some stuff. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to rotate our head left and right based on our mouse movement. So head.rotate underscore y. We're going to rotate the y-axis. And we're going to use this deg2rad, basically degrees to radians. This is a really important method to use whenever you're trying to do any kind of circular movement. Degrees to radians. We're going to say minus event dot relative dot x multiplied by mouse sensitivity. All right, and I'm going to go full screen so that we don't lose code. So what this line of code is saying is basically we're going to take this head object that we've created, we're going to rotate it on its y-axis based on the event's x-axis times the mouse sensitivity. So as I move my mouse, it's going to, and we did this minus here because we want it to be the exact opposite. So if I move my mouse to the right, I actually want to rotate to the right. This, if we left that minus off of there, it would actually rotate us to the left for some reason. So we're going to do that. Let's save this, save everything, and test it and see if our mouse movement can move us back and forth. There we go. So now we can rotate on the x-axis. We can't go up and down yet, and we're not moving forward and backward and stuff yet, but this is pretty nice. We can actually now rotate around in the scene. And if you can't figure out how to get out, remember we said that if we hit escape, it'll let our mouse show up. Okay, so now let's talk about up and down movement. Inside the same if statement, if event is input mouse motion, we also want to create a new variable called x delta, and it's basically just going to be the x movement. So let's say var x delta event dot relative dot y multiplied by mouse sensitivity. Now, the reason why we're creating a variable here is because we're going to use this variable to clamp in our up and down mouse movement. The reason why is because if we didn't do this trick that I'm about to show you, then we would be able to look straight up and then continue looking back, and it would rotate backward, and we'd be like looking behind us upside down, which is not what we want, right? We want to clamp it so that you can only look straight up and only look straight down. So we'll say if camera x rotation plus x delta is less than -90 and camera x rotation plus x delta is less than 90, then we will rotate the camera up and down. If not, then we're not gonna rotate. We're not gonna move the camera any farther. So camera dot rotate underscore x, and we'll use that deg to rad, and we'll say minus x underscore delta. All right, so that's going to actually move our camera up and down. And we also want to set our camera x rotation to be plus equals x delta. Camera x rotation plus equals x delta. Okay, so this function right here, this input function that we just created, it's about, 6-7 lines of code. This is going to handle all of our mouse movement and rotating and pitching our character. So let's save and let's play. So now I can look down, I can look up, I can rotate. So now we actually have a character with a head that can move around. All right, perfect. And if you want to change the camera sensitivity or the mouse sensitivity, remember we use that as a variable up here. So you can actually change that variable there if you want. Okay, believe it or not, we're actually getting pretty close to being done. All we have to do now is handle movement, forward, backward, left, and right. But to do that, we actually need to set up those inputs in our project settings. So we'll go to project, project settings, input map. And in our input map, we need to create some new inputs. Let's create move forward, move backward, move left, and move right. Oh, we're also going to want jump as well, because we're going to add the ability to jump. So move forward, move backward, move left, move right, and jump. So move forward is going to be a key, and it's going to be W. Move backward is going to be a key, it's S. Move left is a key, and it's A. Move right is a key, it's D. And jump is a key, and it's the space bar. Okay, so now we have inputs that we can use. Let's do this inside of physics. Yeah, let's do this inside of a physics process delta. So we're going to create a new function, func physics process delta. Now what this is going to do is, because we're moving in physical space, because we're actually moving, we're going to want to use this physics process delta instead of doing it up here in our process delta. Okay, so first we want to get the global transform of our head. What that means is we need to figure out which direction is our head facing, because that is going to be our new forward. So before we do anything, we need to figure out which direction is forward. So we're going to create a new variable, call it head basis, and this is going to be equal to head.get global transform dot basis. All right, so it's basically going to get that head object, that head thing here, and it's going to figure out which way is it facing. Okay. Then we need another variable. We're going to set this, we're basically going to create a direction. So var direction, and we're going to set that equal to a vector 3. Just an empty vector 3. We're going to change that here in a minute. All right, now we want to check to see if we're pushing the right action. So if input dot is action just pressed. Actually, no, we want to use is action pressed because we want this to continuously happen. So we'll use is action pressed, and then the action is going to be move forward. So if we're pressing the move forward button, then we want to change direction to be minus equals head basis dot z. All right. Now else, or elif, input dot is action pressed, and this will be move backward, direction plus equals head basis dot z. So that's going to be our forward and backward movement. Let's give that a shot. Let's save our scene and play. Oh, nothing's happening. I remember why. I know why. I got too excited. We'll fix that in a minute. Basically, all we're doing now is we're just changing the direction variable, but we need our direction to actually apply movement to our object, which we haven't done yet. We're going to do that soon. All right, let's do our left and right. So if input dot is action pressed, move left, direction, left is going to be minus equals head basis dot x, and then elif input dot is action pressed, move right, direction, oh, spelled direction wrong, plus equals head basis dot x. Okay. All right. So that's handling all of our movement. Now this direction variable, the problem that we have now is that if we were to move left, it'd be fine. Move right, fine. Up, fine. Down, or forward, fine. Backward, fine. All of that, it would be fine. The problem is if we were to move forward and to the left, we would be going diagonal, and it would actually multiply our movement speeds, and it would make us go much faster diagonally than we would normally just going straight. So we need to do something called normalize. So we're going to normalize direction. So direction equals direction dot normalized. So that's just basically making it so that we don't have that weird bug where we move faster on a diagonal. Okay. Now next, we want to change our velocity. So our velocity is what actually creates movement. Velocity equals velocity dot, we're going to use linear interpolate, so that we get a gradual movement from dead stop to actually moving full speed. So we're going to go in the direction times speed at the rate of acceleration times delta. All right, so that is changing our velocity so that we're setting this velocity vector 3 to be the direction times speed and our acceleration times delta and on a linear interpolation. All right, let's apply some gravity to this thing. So velocity dot y, minus equals gravity, so that our character actually falls. And let's jump. Let's do our jumping. Jumping is so easy. All we have to do is just check to see if input dot is action just pressed jump, and let's check to see if we're on the floor. So if is on floor, if those two things are true, if we push the jump button and we're on the floor, then we want to change velocity dot y plus equals jump power. Okay, now there's one line of code that we have left to do. None of this would work. None of this movement would work without this last line. This last line of code is our move and slide. It's basically what's going to apply the actual movement based on our velocity. Now we've been changing our velocity a ton in the last couple of lines, figuring out if we're going up or down or left or jumping or whatever. Now we're going to apply that velocity to move and slide. And we're going to move and slide on velocity, and we're going to set our up direction, vector 3 dot up, so that we can check which way the floor is supposed to be. Okay, now that's a lot that we just did, but if we've done everything correctly, if we save our scenes, let's save our scene, and play the game, we should be able to move around and jump and do all the cool stuff. So, oh gosh, okay, I was looking straight down. All right, so I can still rotate, and it looks like, oh yeah, I can move, I can jump. Nice, nice. I can go left and right, and I can go diagonal. All right, so I have a fully functioning character controller. Let's jump off the edge and see what happens. Oh no, I'm falling. All right, so with just, under 50 lines of code, we've just created a fully functional character controller for a first-person game. We can use this for a first-person shooter or a first-person, platformer or whatever. I think this is probably a good stopping place here. Get your game in there. You can actually make your platform bigger if you want to play around with it more, add some obstacles to jump over, whatnot. After this, we're going to start let's create a shooting mechanic next. Yeah, that sounds like fun. We'll create some shooting mechanics. All right, that's it for me. Thanks for paying attention, and I'll see you next time.